And so he breaks in and blows Jack Phillips' ears off with this message saying, hey, I've got some messages for you, some ice warnings. And Phillips retorts,
keep out, shut up, I'm working Cape Race.
And so this operator, there's only one operator in California, which again is 10 to 12 miles away, says, you know what, it's been a long day. And he turns his set off, which is gonna have implications down the line that are amazing.
Those were ordinary days, and into them had crept only gradually the telephone, the talking machine, the automobile, the airplane, due to have soon such a stimulating yet devastating effect upon civilization. The morning paper had headlines no larger than half an inch in height. These days were peaceful. It seems to me that the disaster about to occur was the event which not only made the world rub its eyes and awake, but woke it with a start, keeping it moving at a rapidly accelerating pace ever since, with less peace, satisfaction, and happiness. To my mind, the world of today awoke April 15th, 1912.
On the night Carpathia came into New York, it's thundering, it's lightning, rain's coming down. The dock in New York Harbor is just mobbed with people. Thousands of people who don't know if their husband, wives, daughters, sons have made it or not. And they see this ship emerging out of the darkness, brilliantly lit up. And it's met in the harbor by all these reporters on boats. These reporters literally start throwing gobulets of money onto the deck of Carpathia, telling the passengers, jump off, we'll pick you out of the water, and we'll pay you whatever you want for your story. Anything you want for your story. And when the harbor pilot comes on, they all try and jump on board too, and they literally get punched and thrown off because this is the scoop of the century. And Carpathia pulls up. And of course, Guglielmo Marconi is at the head of the crowd to get on Carpathia when she pulls in, which has his wireless operator, Harold Bride, on board. Everybody wanted to talk to him because he's the surviving wireless operator. Marconi was a fascinating guy. Guglielmo Marconi was from Italy, and he had a sort of quasi-interest in science, but he really had more of an entrepreneur's bent. He actually started some experiments in his attic of his parents' home. He had a cathode ray, and in the cathode ray were iron filings. So when he sent out an electric signal, the iron filings jumped into the middle of a sort of glass bar in the middle of the cathode ray. So this meant that action had occurred from this electrical signal. So the question was, well, how far could this go? So he had a friend take a gun and go off a long distance, and he shot off a signal, and when his friend received the signal, he shot off his gun. So he develops this technology that others had been developing, but he sort of takes it one step further. And he gives a science experiment, and basically they have a transmitter and a receiver, and the receiver is in a box that dings. And so they're in this theater, all these people are there, and so basically Marconi would walk around the theater with this box. You know, somebody's manning the transmitter, and so they'd send off the wireless telegraphy signal, it would hit the box and it would ding. And everybody kept looking for wires. You know, where are the wires connecting this box to this transmitter? And Marconi just kept walking around with it, sort of like almost a waiter presenting this new technology. Wireless. So then he started to think, you know, I wonder if this would work on water. That's really what you need. You need these ships to be in contact, because up to then, ships would just disappear. Nobody knew what happened to them. So everybody's like, no. It won't work because the Earth is curved. The radio waves will just bounce off into space. There's no way it'll work. So he went through all these experiments on the English Channel, and basically, you know, he erected towers that were blown down. He ended up using a kite to sort of get an antenna aloft, but he was able to transmit a signal across the English Channel. So they thought, well, why not the ocean? And again, everybody's like, there's no way this is gonna work. And they didn't understand this at the time. Wireless can only go about 500 miles during the daylight hours, but at night, on a cold, clear night like April 14th, 1912, where it was just brilliantly clear, these signals could bounce on and on up to 2,000 miles. So when Marconi proved this was amazing to people. This was just groundbreaking because now a ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean could tell the world what was going on. And by the way, that's what makes Titanic so unique. One of the things is that it's the first real-time disaster. So Marconi's waiting at the dock, and aboard Carpathia, Harold Cotton, who was the wireless man on Carpathia, literally keels over from exhaustion. So they say to Harold Bride, who survived under a lifeboat, feet are horribly frostbitten. They say to him, look, we know you've been through hell and back, but can you take over the wireless? You're the only one that knows Morse code. So he does. The first telegram he gets is from Guglielmo Marconi, who says to him, don't say a word. Don't say a word to anybody. I've arranged for you to tell your story to the New York Times for $1,000, which is like $20,000 today. And he doesn't. And Carpathia pulls up. And he's literally one of the first people to get on. He's a rock star by today's standards. Everybody knows who this guy is. So the seas part for him when he walks on board, and he goes right to the wireless room where Harold Bride is still working, still sending messages, and he says to him, your work is done. He has him taken off the ship and taken to a waiting car. Then he's taken to the Strand Hotel where these reporters are there. And then he sits down and tells them what happened on Titanic. He gives them the story, basically, of the century.
I was standing by Phillips, telling him to go to bed, when the captain put his head in the cabin. We struck an iceberg. Begin at the beginning. I was born at Nunhead, England, 22 years ago, and joined the Marconi forces last July. I first worked on the Haverford and then the Lusitania. I joined the Titanic at Belfast with Jack Phillips.
Jack Phillips and Harold Bride were two working class youths from England, and they both worked on different ships and ended up on Titanic. Actually, for Jack Phillips, it was really sort of a promotion. He was really leading the team there, if you will.
I didn't have much to do on the Titanic, except relieve Phillips from midnight until sometime in the morning when he woke up. On the night of the accident, I was not sending, but was asleep. I was due to be up to relieve Phillips earlier than usual.
These guys are sort of like the computer nerds of today. It is a young man's game at this point. Nobody understands Morse code except these operators. It sounds like static, and it's amazing they can decipher this, but they do. And they're able to travel. It's exciting for them to be on this big ship. And they really are on the cutting edge of technology of their time. This ability to send a wireless message through the atmosphere is just amazing, and it's going to change everything. And what's interesting is this: they are pretty much isolated from the ship. The wireless operators slept in their room, they ate there, they had no contact with the crew. And by the way, the room was called the silent room because it had to be insulated against several things. One was noise coming in, but two, they were using direct current. We use alternating current, so we don't electrocute ourselves. Direct current, you step it way up, especially if you've got to broadcast out, shoot out these signals across the Atlantic. The key would literally crack very loudly, so they had to also muffle that.
And that reminds me, if it hadn't been for a lucky thing, we would have never been able to send any call for help.
So before Titanic hits the iceberg, believe it or not, their wireless set was broken. You know, the day of April 14th.
We noticed something was wrong on Sunday, and Phillips and I worked for 7 hours to find it. We found a burned out secretary at last, and repaired it just a few hours before the iceberg was struck.
And they had all these messages piled up. Wireless is really for passengers. Harold Bride, Jack Phillips did not work for White Star. They worked for Marconi. And that's really how Marconi made his money. Because you could go send a telegram now from Titanic, and Titanic had the most powerful wireless set you could put on a ship. So you could send a telegram back to New York saying, hey, Jim, I'm in the middle of the Atlantic on Titanic, having a great time, meet you for lunch. Also, what they could do is they could take information from a shore station where the information would be beamed out or shot out to Titanic, and then they had big printing presses, and Titanic had its own newspaper. So then Titanic would create a newspaper so the rich could sit and have their coffee and croissants and read about, say, the Chicago Cubs or whatever. This was amazing to people. And it was a pretty sophisticated system. I mean, they had pneumatic tubes. Stewards would take the messages to the room. They'd come out with a message, but it was laborious to send them. And so they would just pile up. You know, there's a lot of passengers. So these guys are going hard at it when a ship named the Californian is approaching pretty close. They're maybe 10 to 12 miles away. And they've got some messages for Titanic. And so what happens is, while Jack Phillips, who's the head operator, is trying to get through these messages, this operator breaks in. And it's sort of like getting in your car with the radio turned up. If these boats are on top of each other, then, you know, it's very loud to the operator. And so he breaks in and blows Jack Phillips' ears off with this message saying, hey, I've got some messages for you, some ice warnings. And Phillips retorts,
Keep out, shut up. I'm working Cape Race.
and so this operator, there's only one operator on Californian, which again is 10 to 12 miles away, says, you know what, it's been a long day. And he turns his set off, which is going to have implications down the line that are amazing.
To catch the rest of this remarkable story, go to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.